So much has changed since I last talked about Mr. Robot 2 years ago. The creator of Mr. Robot, Sam Esmail, has gone on to direct one other project, Homecoming, a series on Amazon.
And I think that show allowed him to develop his style a bit more, in a different way.
Okay, we need to keep refining the medication, absolutely. They'll be boring their grandkids with their fascinating war stories, but for now, Heidi, you should be proud.
It had some Hitchcock influences, which Sam Esmail kind of brings onto this season of Mr. Robot.
It felt so new and polished and more cinematic. I love the zooms. Oh, the zoom in. Oh, it's so good.
The hacker thriller elements of the show are so exciting. The stakes feel so grand. The show also has an emotional core. The characters are great, and we care about them. We follow Elliot Alderson as he creates a hacker group, which also spawns a revolution called F Society, which aims to take down the most powerful leaders in the world. As Elliot says, the ones who play God without permission. The show takes place in an alternate history version of 2015 New York City. Mr. Robot is about a man trying to have power over his situation, and it's a situation many of us find ourselves in, as genuine human connections become harder to come by, completely disconnected from and desensitized by the world around us. He thinks the way to take control is by blowing up the world and building a new one in its place. What he doesn't realize is the world is more complicated than that. Changing the world on such a grand scale is a delusional quest, and maybe being honest with ourselves and accepting who we are is the first step to changing our lives for the better. Control is an illusion. It is just as fleeting as the time we have with the people we love. But Mr. Robot isn't about beating you down with these facts, although it does that plenty. So did this final season live up to my expectations? Come on, this is Sam Esmail we're talking about. Exciting, riveting, intense, emotional, suspenseful, captivating. There's so much to appreciate about it. It's very personal to the creator. It's really engaging. The depiction of mental illness is trippy.
Very important business there!
This season takes place on the week of Christmas. The family dynamics kind of come more into play. Elliot and Darlene dealing with their grief. Dom trying to protect her family during the holidays. A lot of the characters are dealing with their emotional baggage in a very Christmas special-like way. Then as the season goes on, it starts to deliver more on what you want from the show. The hacking starts to come in, the epic set pieces, that fast-paced editing along with Matt Quayle's score. There's a good build-up to this stuff. It doesn't indulge in it. Another thing I love about the show is that the story is always moving forward. It has a clear end point. It was originally written to be a movie, or 5-act movie. Sam Esmail was thinking it was going to be 5 seasons long. It was shortened to 4. I'm going to briefly recap what's happened so far. If you want to just hear this out, that's fine too. But be warned, there are spoilers. And I hope some of this makes you interested in starting the series. You have a main character named Elliot. He's depressed, alone. Mr. Robot comes in. He's like, dude, we can start a society together. F Society. He starts this group with a few friends of his, one of them being Darlene. But what's later revealed is that Darlene is actually his sister, and Mr. Robot is actually a hallucination of his dead father. He also has a friend from childhood, Angela Moss, who is trying to sue this evil corporation that is responsible for killing Elliot and Angela's parents. This evil corporation is unstoppable, but they're charmed by her, especially Philip Price. Elliot is trying to stop the Deus Group and the Dark Army, a Chinese hacker group ran by an evil billionaire, White Rose, who is also the Minister of China in her altered persona, Minister Zhang. Vera, a major antagonist on the show, plays a vital role in this season. There's also this weird guy, Tyrell Wellick. It makes me think that they have something planned for her later on. So this episode started with Angela getting shot in the head. It's a big bomb to drop on the audience. Although I did find myself aligning more with Philip Price this season because he's helping Elliot out. He's not a good guy. He's just good compared to White Rose. White Rose beat him down, killed his daughter in front of him, destroyed his company, but they continue to talk as if it's some kind of game. Someone of his renown and wealth couldn't do anything to stop them.
You're panicking right now. Remove all emotion and you'll do just fine.
This calls back to a scene in season 2 before we find out that Angela is Price's daughter.
You're panicking right now, but the minute you remove emotion from this, you'll do just fine.
I like that it stays on Angela's reaction when the Dark Army comes out to kill her. They keep it vague, so on a first viewing you don't know. What a sad character. And Sam Esmail himself even threatens to kill the main character of the show. Whenever people talk about character deaths on the internet, they always mention Sam Esmail, like, oh, Sam Esmail killed him. They really drag this moment out too. They really want you to buy into it. And there's even some setup with Elliot's family, the fake one in his head.
My job was to protect it.
Your job was to protect all of us.
What's gonna happen?
The inevitable. We're all gonna go away.
And these first 2 episodes were mainly about these characters processing their grief. It has a great opening. It was like a classic, corny Mr. Robot hacker thing.
This is Mr. Robot.
Shots like this, where you have the dude running through the middle of Grand Central Station, and it looks like a real crowd. So let's recap what's going on. Last season, Elliot gave White Rose a plan to push up her shipping project, which means she's gonna get to build her weird machine sooner. Of course, White Rose is OCD about time, so she decides to not kill Elliot until the shipping project is complete. Meanwhile, Darlene is losing it. Elliot's like,
Shut up!
Elliot hates Darlene for distracting him from trying to kill White Rose, which is all he's focused on, more specifically her machine. White Rose's machine is the focal point of the story. We never really get to understand what it is, but it has this looming presence over the show, just like White Rose. Elliot and White Rose only have a few very brief interactions, and yet she's this major threat. To each character, the machine represents something totally different, kind of similar, but different. For White Rose, it's a chance at a life with her dead boyfriend, husband, lover. For Angela, it's a chance at a life with her mother again. That girl we see in the flashback with her mom in season 3 is the same girl we see when Angela is indoctrinated by White Rose. It's a chance to go back to that point in her life with her mother. For Elliot, it's a chance at the life he should have had, the life that his father took away from him and that White Rose took away from him. What the machine is actually doesn't matter. We're all chasing for control, especially control over the worst parts of our lives, the people we've lost, the mistakes we've made. That's what the machine is. It's a chance to undo everything that hurt us. But Elliot realizes those things are just part of who we are, and we have to accept it. We have to accept the truth.
The only thing that happened just now is that you finally faced the truth. You've been looking away from your whole life.
That's how White Rose is able to manipulate people. She's offering a fast and easy solution to everyone's pain. If that isn't the most American thing in the world. Around this time, Elliot is blackmailing a lawyer. He leads us to Cyprus National Bank.
Cyprus National Bank.
When this cartoon character realizes Elliot can't protect him, he shoots himself in the head. And Elliot is trying to get through the crowd to find out what happened. He says, "Excuse me." Like, he doesn't just knock these people out of the way. Like, because Elliot wouldn't do that, because he's a nice guy. There's just so much attention to detail that's excellent. Multiple references to Halloween 3, Silver Shamrock, and Connell Cochran, who's the villain. Both Halloween 3 and Mr. Robot share kind of similar themes. Both are critiques of capitalism and consumer culture. Both have the motif of masks. Masks are the main plot point of Halloween 3. That's how Connell Cochran plans to kill all the kids. The masks melt their heads and turn them into bugs. Here we have the F Society mask, but the other mask, Elliot's mask.
Do I take off a mask when it stops being a mask? When it's as much a part of me as I am?
There are references to a lot of different movies in this season. Jurassic Park, Die Hard in episode 5. That was a very action-heavy episode with Elliot running around New York City. Krista. She might be inspired by Lorraine Bracco's character in The Sopranos. This shot is just like Fight Club, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Episode 7 is very Hitchcockian, taking a lot of influence from Rope. Rope never leaves this apartment, as does this episode take place entirely in Krista's office. It is a showcase of raw acting talent. To get back on track, Elliot also gets a name from this lawyer, John Garson, which leads him here. A honeypot owned by Philip Price, who kills him and then brings him back to life. That leads us to episode 2. Price explains to Elliot and the audience how the Deus Group was formed, and how White Rose used all of her power and resources to fund the Dark Army and her project. Elliot's resorted to setting up a base in the abandoned Allsafe building with notes on the wall. I feel like Elliot would have all this on a document on his computer. He could have put it on a disk and then hid it away so the Dark Army doesn't find it. When Price meets with Minister Zhang later on, he informs him he's resigning as CEO of E-Corp. And so the Deus group must meet before the new year to appoint a new successor. Elliot gets a call that his mother has passed away, which means he's forced to meet with Darlene and arrange the funeral. They aren't broken up by their mother's death that much, and Elliot is a little distracted, considering he has a week until White Rose ships her machine and blows Elliot's brains out. It is actually Angela's death that has separated them. Elliot, as usual, withdrew himself from the people who cared about him and focused on what he does best: hacking. But really, he's just bottling up his feelings, taking out his insecurities on the world around him. It also gives him an opportunity to peek into people's lives without permission. He's distrustful of everyone. Elliot doesn't realize the magnitude of what he's doing, because it's all hidden behind computer screens and ones and zeros. But once he sees that his actions have really bad consequences, he has to start coming to terms with himself and what makes him so closed off from people.
This is all I have left of her.
This disc gives us a way to remember this person when we want to be with them.
I will miss her.
This tape brings them back to a happy moment in their childhood. You can draw parallels to White Rose's machine, a piece of technology that aims to bring you to a happy moment. We rely on technology to keep us in these moments of happiness. It's all to distract us from the now. Darlene and Elliot listening to that tape of them as kids is a tiny example. This tape is the closest they will ever actually get to having Angela back. And it seems like by the end of this episode, they've come to terms with it and are ready to move on. At the end of the episode, it turns out Elliot had a personality that he didn't know about.
The other one.
The episode starts with White Rose's backstory. Way back when she was just appointed Minister of State Security, she was seeing this guy, Chen. Chen knows about both White Rose and Zhang. He loves them both. This guy is the only person who ever loved White Rose. Very tragic. Meanwhile, Elliot tries reaching out to Krista, his old psychiatrist, just so he can have some closure, but she wants nothing to do with him. Unfortunately, they're spotted together by one of Vera's goons. Oh yeah, Vera is back in town.
And in order for our kingdom to be built, I need a brilliant architect. I know.
Elliot's way into Cyprus National Bank is Susan Jacobs, who is dead because of Darlene in season 2. A little on-the-nose imagery here. His new way in is Olivia Cortez. They hook up and he gets the passcode he needs. But things get a little more personal and she starts telling him about her drug history. Jesus, it's very sad stuff. Elliot notices he's being tailed by the Dark Army, and he goes home where he finds Tyrell waiting for him. The Dark Army is right outside. That's a nice zoom. It's great. Or even at the start of this episode with White Rose and Chen, there's real confidence in the visual storytelling. So there's that Dark Army agent outside. It's lit all red to foreshadow that, and maybe this. They go to a gas station and just leave the car because they're a bunch of idiots. When they come out of the store, the van is gone, and they're forced to walk through the forest until they reach some town that's somewhere.
Hey! Jesus Christ!
For a large section of this episode, Tyrell and Elliot are wandering around the woods. Darlene is doing some work with Olivia's credentials, and it turns out she doesn't have enough access. She tries to steal a car, but is caught by Santa Claus. But all is good, because she gives him a ride home. I like how open Darlene's character is with everyone.
But I'm really worried about him right now, and it pisses me off that I'm worried because I am always worried about him, and he flat out told me to fuck off.
Just random people she meets on the street. She doesn't care.
This whole economic fuck show is my fault.
Darlene is so desperate for someone to talk to. She used to have that with her brother, or Cisco, or all those other people that are now gone. Then they stumble across the van, and the Dark Army agent shoots Tyrell before killing himself. And then Tyrell just walks off, and that's it. We never see him again. While we see him on this TV, the character of Tyrell Wellick was mainly inspired by Patrick Bateman. The commonalities between these two are pretty clear.
You're fired!
I don't think I need to get into it. This is an entirely silent episode. Season 3 had the one take episode. It wasn't actually done in one take, but it's made to look like real time, and it is really impressive. In season 2, we were graced with the sitcom episode. You could call Damon's one of these episodes to a certain extent. So, silently, Elliot and Darlene break into virtual realty. They hack the thing, they go back downstairs, they get caught. Elliot runs out of the building, gets chased across the city. Be sure to take tons of photos of it, guys. Then he jumps off a cliff into Darlene's car and they drive away. And Vera gives Krista a visit.
It's time we talk.
That is the only line of dialogue in the whole episode, aside from this line, which starts the episode.
It's cool, dude. We don't have to talk.
I like how Matt Quayle's score has become more present this season. I love this part where he's going down the stairs and the footsteps match up with the score perfectly. This episode is very light on plot. It's all about the visuals and the tension. There's a lot riding on this. There's a lot built up to this moment, and if they don't do it just right, White Rose wins. While it can be a bit corny how no one says anything the entire episode, the star of this episode is Todd Campbell. This man has been the director of photography on every episode of Mr. Robot.
For us, it was like, if we do this, you take a perspective on a story, something this extreme, you got to do it the whole time, So like that was also pretty frightening. I was like, are we gonna seriously short side every scene for the next 5 fucking seasons of the show? And Sam's like, yeah.
When I read season 3, when they sent me the scripts, the whole first episode, New York City's in a blackout. And it's exterior nights with cars driving, and can't just VFX out every storefront. When we ended up pulling it off, it was a condor every block for like 8 or 10 blocks, with a big soft light up there, and then just turn off all the street lights and buy out all the businesses on the street and go to work. That felt pretty impossible when we were starting that, and difficult episode in general. And then I shot literally by candlelight in some of those apartments, literally just with candles.
I changed the look a little bit every season. I think the photography can evolve since the story does. I changed things up in season 2 and even now in season 3. It's a very low contrast now. And everything we did in season 1, all of his close-ups, 32 millimeter, 4 feet, 10 inches away. That's how we shot every Elliot close-up, to throw the background out of focus and, because there's so much voiceover, to be with Tim inside his head. Well, I think we should flatten it out a little bit. So in season 2, we changed lenses. We with a different direction. We didn't do, I think we were on a 21 most often. For me, it was like, I want to see his environment around him. But I still played really heavy contrast. In season 3, I changed lenses again, and I lowered the contrast so that you could, as the world's being destroyed, bags of garbage stacked up, they don't pick up the garbage anymore, and I felt like we should see more of the environment, like flatten it out and make it lower contrast and make it feel a little more, but I just kind of wanted to pull the life out of everything, and just flatten the world out and like make it feel, depressing.
Mr. Campbell even has a cameo in the 8th episode. He shot other shows you might have heard of, but what makes this work stand out is his collaboration with Sam Esmail.
Sam has a very strong visual idea of what he wants. Trying to get into his head was, I don't even know if I'm there yet. I think we push each other. And from a lighting and camera perspective, I don't know, I just try to listen and figure out what he wants. He's very specific about certain things, certain things. Variables, I'll try to bring to the table and match to where I think he's wanting to go.
The cinematography this season took some influence from the works of Brian De Palma. One of De Palma's biggest influences was, of course, Hitchcock. And like how Homecoming style went back to the 60s Hitchcock, Mr. Robots goes back to 80s De Palma. Vera tells Krista a story of a little bitch, and how the little bitch was bullied, until he took an aluminum bat and hit the bully back.
And you gonna be my aluminum bat.
Krista is the aluminum bat he's going to use to break Elliot, get into his psyche, and if there's any way to get into Elliot's head, this is the way to do it. While Elliot and Darlene are on the phone, she's looking at a pair of ballet slippers, reminding her of Angela. Elliot buys drugs off of Leon and uses them to dose Olivia. He ruins her life, but he gets the information he needs from Cyprus National Bank, and then he gets kidnapped by Vera. White Rose is still not convinced Elliot's a threat.
He's too much of a liability.
You're being foolish.
Her new assistant is warning her not to be too full of herself.
Mr. Alderson is a good-for-nothing wretch that is not to be trusted.
If she had just killed Elliot and delayed her shipping project, she might still have all her money. She might have completed the machine. Elliot and Price were able to take advantage of her hubris. Meanwhile, Darlene is being held gunpoint by... Oh yeah! I haven't mentioned Dom at all so far. We'll get into her later. There are many characters in this show that choose to live in a delusion rather than confront the reality of their situation. We see this happen to Angela over the first 3 seasons. At first, she is an independent, capable person, but as she moves her way up the corporate ladder, she becomes more of a sociopath and more desperate for that human connection. So much so that White Rose is able to manipulate her into thinking she can be with her mom again.
You wanna know what I believe? That there's another world out there for both of us.
Maybe this other world is the world in your mind. This place can be just as real as the real world. There are 2 places that kind of intersect the real world and the world in Elliot's mind. The first one being Krista's office. Krista is trying to help Elliot confront who he is and face the truth. Her office is kind of out of time and space. It's not just one place. And unlike Krista's room, White Rose's room brings out the darkest parts of your mind. It's here in season 2, but there's a very similar room in season 4, where Elliot and White Rose meet. In Krista's office, you come closer to the truth and finding yourself, while here, you're steered away from the truth and down a path of self-destruction. You can draw parallels to that room Elliot first met White Rose in.
A Faraday cage. A room specifically designed to prevent electromagnetic interference. No radio, no signal.
It's just you. You're alone with your thoughts. This is the room that starts Elliot's fever dream of a finale. This episode's pretty phenomenal. 407 takes place over 5 acts, each act slightly changing the setting, lighting, and character dynamics. Vera's ultimate goal is to get into Elliot's mind, so that he can use it to achieve his dream of taking over New York. Elliot Villar plays this character. He's both incredibly intimidating and really funny. Just like every other villain on the show, he's a complex character. You know, I just got what this dude was trying to do, and maybe if he got his life together, got a real estate license, and stopped smoking crack, he could probably do well for himself. Act 1 focuses on Elliot versus Vera. He tells Elliot his grand plan of building an empire, to which Elliot isn't too impressed. He takes him to Krista, but then he demands to meet
Mr. Robot.
That's the name of the show. And Act 2 mainly focuses on Mr. Robot versus Vera.
That don't sound too good, Mr. Robot.
The biggest takeaway from this act is Mr. Robot is hiding the truth, not just from Vera, but also Elliot. Mr. Robot thinks sheltering Elliot from the truth is the best way to deal with it. What he didn't see coming, though, was Vera. See, in life, there are people who would try to break you down and use your weaknesses against you, so it's important to be strong enough to face these things. Vera even tells Elliot he's more scared of him. This is a side of him we've seen from time to time. We just saw it earlier this season with how he ruined Olivia.
The day he pushed you out the window.
My dad didn't push me. I jumped. Darlene told me I remembered it wrong.
See, she doesn't even know what she... I said shut up!
This window incident has been brought up on the show every chance they get, the start of whatever battle is going on in Elliot's mind. The time of this window incident was around the time Mr. Robot was created, to protect Elliot from his father. Now that Elliot's in an emotionally vulnerable state, Vera swoops in, gives Elliot some speech about overcoming your trauma and becoming stronger for it. It seems to be working, but Krista stabs Vera in the back and then goes. The show doesn't give us too much information as to his abuse, but I can see where people have issue with it. The idea of keeping Elliot's past a mystery, in a way, is more interesting. I don't think it's meant to be taken so literally either. Not everyone who's been sexually abused in that way comes out with schizophrenia, just like not how every person with dissociative identity disorder has some kind of deep buried traumatic experience. But if you look at it from a story and a dramatic standpoint, it makes sense. Clearly, it's not going to work for everybody to know this character that the audience has become so connected to had such a dark point in their childhood. You know, Mr. Robot once again pushes the bounds of what's expected. We still got a lot to get into. We have a few characters we didn't talk about. We still got to take out White Rose and her stupid machine. And finally, we have a twist so earth-shattering, it bends the fabric of time and space. All this and more, part 2.